good morning in Germany and Europe, and good afternoon in Asia and China. Welcome to all of you to our webinar of the Sino-German Center at Frankfurt School of Finance and Management. As you all know, our topic today is about the future of the China policy of the new German government. Before I introduce our speaker today, let me say three short points to the topic or the background of the topic. First, we have a new government. We have a new party mix, let's say, in the government, only two parties instead of three. And this also leads perhaps to some changes in the China policy, we have to see. Second, the geopolitical developments in recent time, especially the weakening of the transatlantic relationships triggered by President Trump, which is also perhaps an incentive for a change in China policy. And last but not least, China itself. If you frequently reading the related press, have sent some signal to, especially to Europe-China relations, that they're perhaps ready for some compromises and perhaps a relaunch of the relationships. So a lot of things to discuss, a lot of development underway. I'm very happy that we have today Frank Sieren for the first time in our webinar. Welcome, Frank. He is in Beijing.
Hello.
As most of you know, Frank is one of the leading German China specialists in China, and of course well known here in Germany. He's lived more than 30 years in China. Also together with his family, he's the longest Western journalist living directly in China, and he wrote a variety of articles and worked for different, especially German, but also foreign newspapers like Süddeutsche, Wirtschaftswoche, Die Zeit, Handelsblatt, Tagesspiegel. Frank is especially well known for his books. He wrote an enormous number of books about China. I remember by myself when I first traveled to China in 2002, I think. At that time, I read this China Code. This was a very impressive book, and also for me, I learned a lot. And also well known is Zukunft China. Recently published two books, China to Go and Shenzhen Zukunft Made in China. And both are about the technological development of China, the fast progress made. And as perhaps you know, Shenzhen is a kind of the Silicon Valley of China, very interesting deed. And again, both books are very successful and best-selling books. He's working also for the TV, for television, and he already launched some China movies or documentary movies in the German broadcasting, and he's actually underway to produce a new series, China series, for television. So we're very happy, Frank, to have you here. I think there are not much people in Germany or Germans in China who are so familiar with the country than you, probably you're the most one. And so we are very interesting to learn from you. What is your perspective on the new policy of the German government with regards to China? Perhaps before I hand over to you, I should mention, please note that we record the introductory statement of Frank, but later on the discussion is not recorded, so feel free to type in questions, and I will, after the talk of Frank, which lasts for around half an hour, I will forward this to Frank Sieren, and he will answer. Having said that, I hand over to Frank Sieren. So Frank, the floor is yours. Thank you again for having you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, and hello from Beijing, and where it's already late afternoon. I would like to concentrate on three quite huge developments China is transitioning from into a different phase of its development. The first transition is domestically. Until now, China was an authoritarian system, and it's still an authoritarian system. But the people, especially the investors and the consumers, are becoming more self-confident, and this is changing a lot. I will later explain in more detail. Then economically, China is in transition from the factory of the world, still quite successful as a factory of the world with a trade balance surplus of 1,000 billion US dollars last year, is transitioning to a innovation economy, which is changing a lot, especially for us. And the third big movement is that even before Donald Trump starting with his policies, the global South, including China, was moving together. Now, actually, they're working together even more closely, despite the frictions and conflicts and different interests they have. They have quite a good attitude to put aside the differences and to work on the common interests. But let's start probably with the most important development for our future. It's actually the movement from the factory of the world to an innovation world leader. Since Deng Xiaoping opened up the country, China started to produce products we developed, and this was actually for several decades a win-win situation. We could produce our products cheaper in the Chinese market. We could deliver it to the Chinese consumers, to the new middle class, and we could export the products back home, back to Europe, where the products became more and more in a more and more higher quality, available to a more lower price. And we thought this is going to go forever. And there was a saying that the Chinese are only able to reproduce. Some of them are even able to copy, but they're not innovative. If you're looking back now, it's probably was a quite strange position looking at the history of China until 1820 or 30. All the centuries, most of the centuries before, China was a very innovative and world-leading country. Then they had about 150, 200 years big trouble for a simple reason. They underestimated their competitors. They underestimated the strength of the Industrial Revolution in Europe. They could not imagine that at the other side of the world, there are some smart people as well and developing interesting or really convincing technology. And in some ways, it's now the other way around. We feel now like the Middle Kingdom, and we have problems to understand and to accept that in other parts, non-Western parts of the world, that there are huge movements of innovation. And this is actually not good news for us because we found out too late about this. We were so sure that we are the leading innovation, the leading technology producers, that we didn't really watch our competitors. And then in several areas, the Chinese are now have world-leading technology, and the biggest problem for our industry in Germany, in Europe, and especially in Germany, is all the changes in the car industry. Basically, the Chinese cars, to sum up a long story, the Chinese cars are now cheaper, they're more innovative, they are produced faster, and they are more competitive concerning design and the wishes of the Chinese customers, who have completely different expectations for a car. It's not only about connectivity, it's also about the driving experience, basically in the mega cities in China and on the highways as well, where you only can drive 120 kilometers an hour. You're not really interested in driving experience. You are actually interested in the opposite, in a lounge experience where you don't even feel or realize that you're driving. And then, and from this perspective, the next step is quite close. This is autonomous driving, whereas actually Huawei is leading. Huawei has the most sophisticated autonomous driving system, even more developed than American competitors like Waymo, for several reasons. The Europeans are far behind. They are not able to compete. So we have now already the batteries where we are not competing. We have the connectivity. We also have the platform. The Chinese platforms are much more efficient. And we have the autonomous driving. And the enterprises like Volkswagen, they try to get back on track, but it's very difficult. They're actually not able to do it within their own know-how. They have to cooperate with Chinese players. And the problem is, for example, Volkswagen is competing with Xiaopeng, and Xiaopeng is a car producer by itself. So they are partners and competitors at the same time. And the Chinese now do somehow what we have done with them. When we had joint ventures with the Chinese, we didn't give them our latest version of technology, but we gave them one generation before, and then we could make sure that they not becoming too strong as competitors. Now it's the opposite. Now the car industry is fighting to be competitive again, and it's not only about volume cars, it's not only about Volkswagen, but it's also about our most prestigious cars, our most luxury cars like Porsche. Porsche is not selling well anymore in China, 30% down in 24, and now this year already 45%. This is because there are some competitors in the market. The cars look similar, but they are not copied, like from a smartphone producer. Now the whole thing was going down here, but I'm back. This is a smartphone producer who produces a kind of Porsche for 30,000 euro. Actually, it's below the production price. The production price is 40,000, but the more they sell, the lower, the more they earn. So they're already down with the production cost at 35,000, and this year they will do kind of a break even. But they make so much money with smartphones and other gadgets that it's easily to finance, and the stock market price went up. So it's actually a success story, even if they sell the cars for a lower price than they produce initially. This is a situation which is very tough for Germany, because we had changes in the past. We got rid of the coal mining industry. We got rid of the steel industry. But at those times, we always had another industry following. And now we have the trouble that we don't know what's coming behind the car industry. And we're still performing quite well in Europe, but the only reason why we're still performing quite well is that the Chinese are not in the market yet. But if they're coming with their cheaper cars, and there will come despite trade barriers. You can't stop it. You can slow it down, but you can't stop it. There will be a tough competition in the European market as well. You already have some brands like MG. BYD is accelerating. They were overtaking Tesla this year in Europe. So these are really tough times ahead, but because a lot of work is depending, a lot of jobs are depending on this industry. That's one of the big movement, and we are only at the beginning of a huge innovation movement China is performing. And the second big development is actually probably able to slow down China, and whereas the innovation movement was in favor of the government and it's promoted by the government, these other movement got the government totally by surprise. And it's the growing self-confidence of the consumers and the investors. Some of the investors and consumers are also running out of money, but it's not the majority. The majority just lost trust in the government, and they suddenly realize, in being angry on the government, that the government and the party and the Communist Party can force them to do a lot, but they can't really force them to invest or to consume. And this got the government totally by surprise, and before they could basically start and stop the economic growth by putting money into the market. And now it's more complicated because people are more skeptical, and now the government basically needs to start kind of an informal negotiation process with the investors and with the consumers to satisfy them, to create environments where the consumers and the investors are happy again. And this is the biggest reason right now that the economy is not really restarting in a way that we have seen it in 2008 in the world real estate crisis, in the American prime crisis, when the government threw an enormous amount of money into the markets, and actually China became the economy who's pulling the whole world economy out of the dirt. This is no different, so more complicated, and China is now in a procedure of negotiation, and both sides have to learn to deal with this situation, because there's no gain if one of the two sides is overplaying it. So if the government is overplaying the tough guy, it's not good. And if the consumers and investors are kind of overplaying the angry side or the confrontative part, then a result and a solution is not possible. So we need to hope that both sides are reasonable at the end, and then the economy is gaining track again. But a completely different situation. We didn't have this kind of situation in the last 30, 40 years since the opening up by the reformer Deng Xiaoping. And the third big development is basically it's a global development that, despite all political and governmental and society differences, the global South is moving step by step closer together. Because they see if they hunt in the pack, they can reach broader goals, they can gain track within the G20, and Donald Trump is actually, with his policy, accelerating this movement. So the Asian neighbors of China, they have a lot of problems, a lot of different attitudes, but at the end, they have a strength to put aside the attitude and work as well on the common goals. So, for example, Japan, South Korea, and China are working on a free trade zone. Finally, Thailand has accepted that China is going to finance a rail track from the Chinese border to one of their biggest harbors. And even the Chinese-India relations, which are very complicated and got even more complicated after the military conflict between India and its neighbor Pakistan, where American and European weapons were flying or acting against Chinese weapons. But even they understand that in those tough times, it's better to put aside the differences and to work on a world order where they finally become able to put enough pressure on the minority of the West to, for example, change the global institutions, to make sure that probably the permanent members of the Security Council, UN Security Council, probably get more members of the Global South. India is not a member. Brazil is not a member. No African country is a member. Then working in the World Bank and in IMF to weaken the strengths of the United States. Suddenly, there's also a slight understanding on the Europe side that this is probably a good idea. And it's the movement which goes slowly, but you can see it also institutionalized when you look at ASEP, at this huge free trade zone from New Zealand, all over ASEAN countries, including China, including Japan. And these are quite visible steps for a closer integration. And so probably the impression that the world is falling apart is more a Western impression than an impression of the Global South. In the Global South, the glass is probably half empty and half full at the same time. So they also see the chances. And one goal which is very far away, but which kind of feels reachable now, that you can work towards, to be very optimistic, towards a world order where not the strongest is leading, but the majority. This is one direction the world can go. The other direction is actually the opposite, that we're going to move from one hegemon, from the United States, to the new hegemon, to China. And therefore, it's very, very important that China has a few countries around him which are making sure that they not do everything what they could do for a common goal. Therefore, BRICS is very important. And now, if you see these three movements, we can probably easier decide what Germany should do. So probably Germany, even if it's difficult because Russia is part of BRICS, and there are some countries in BRICS Plus, like Iran, which are not on our list of countries which are sharing our values the most. But probably it would be very pragmatic to support BRICS countries to closer work together with BRICS Plus, basically to contain China, to make sure that China is within a group, that China has friends, and probably in some, if there's some challenges, we can even talk to the friends of China within BRIC and ask them for help. That's one global direction we should get. One thing is clear, and it's not only clear for Europe, but not only clear for Germany, but for Europe as well. We only have 12% of the world economy. We only have 5-6% of the world population. So we cannot play on our own. We are somehow like the Green Party in the German political system. Even if we think, or even if the Green Party members think that their way of life is the best, they need partners to make their policy happen, and they need to do compromises. And if they don't compromise, then they are out of the game, like it's now in this new political constellation. We are, we can say we are in Europe like the Green Party. Europe is like the Green Party for the world. So we, even if we very, very much convinced that our way of life is the best, we need partners. We cannot have trouble with Russia, America, and China and India at the same time. That's not possible, even if there are good reasons to have trouble, and even if we didn't look for the trouble. But we need to have partners, otherwise it's not going to work. On the innovation side, it's pretty much the same. There's one simple American saying or English saying, if you can't beat them, join them. So it makes no sense to close your markets from the technology, because these successful technology is finding its way. You can't prevent yourself from successful technology. The second problem is we need to make money in the biggest car market worldwide and the biggest growth market. So basically, if we not able to get to a certain level of technology, we need to find ways of cooperation. I'm not sure if a car producer is in every way the right cooperation partners, because they are competitors as well, but they are software companies. There are other partners. For example, Huawei, they're not producing cars by themselves. They're only a technology provider. So we basically have to accept that we only going to make it if we partner up with China. We probably not going to succeed anymore against China, all depending on our own. And we can see what our French neighbors have done, which their car industry is in even bigger trouble, or the trouble started earlier. Renault and Chery, they were basically putting their know-how together. Chery is the biggest car exporter. They exported 1.24 million cars last year. And they put their know-how together, and now they have know-how in combustion engines and in electric engines. And they're, for example, producing together now engines for Mercedes cars. That's probably a way we can still succeed, but it's a painful process, that's for sure. And the third, the third development, the stronger self-confidence, is actually puts us probably in a position that we can offer some help in negotiating, or even helping in negotiating techniques, because we can talk to the Chinese and say, look, welcome in our world. We know about this problem, and probably we can sit together and exchange our views and learn from each other. That's more a political trust building concept than a money making concept. But at the end, if I look at the world order right now, China is not our favorite partner, but probably right now our least troubling partner. If you look at the United States, my worries are that these civil war kind of developments, that they probably going to stop in Los Angeles, but then start in another city, that we have for a long time that we get a quite unstable situation, and politically the situation is already quite unstable, and American politics are not very reliable. Concerning Russia, the doors are closed, and I don't see there any opportunities and a new future to cooperate. Actually, this would have been, from a theoretical point of view, this would have been actually the best solution. Europe and Russia together, Europe with its technical know-how and Russia with the resources, if they would have been able to partner up, they would have become a strong third player. And it's actually, and that's the sad side of the story, it's actually China and the US have one common interest. And this common interest is that Europe and Russia are not becoming allies or working together. And they actually achieved this goal. So I don't see any possibility of a cooperation, or I don't even see a near end of the Ukraine war. So therefore, we can have lots of wishes how the world should be. We can run around and tell other countries how they should live, but it's not going to work. We need to make compromises if we want to succeed. And it's not only about business. It's about values as well. That's very important, because when we want to sit at the table where the values of the new world order will be decided, we need to be economically strong. In the centuries before, the table belonged to us. First, it belongs to the Europeans, and they decided who's sitting at the table. Then it belonged to the Americans. Now, probably it's belonging to the rising global South. And if we are not economically strong, as we are militarily playing no role, and as we are not economically strong, we will not be asked to sit at the table, because we will be not powerful enough to play a role in this global world order. So if we want our values to be transferred into the new world order, we have no other chance than to find partners to become economically strong again, that we need to focus more and more on innovation. We will not become strong with a strong military, and we will not become strong in only repairing our bridges and roads and our railway system. We need to stay innovative. That's the biggest learning from the history of China in the 19th century, and that's actually the biggest journey, the biggest learning now on this journey. We have seen within a few years, China was able to turn around the innovation situation. They had a 20-year strategy. We didn't see it. It was open. It was in the 5-year plans. They had one guy who was running this development, is Van Gang, a guy who studied in Aachen, who worked for Audi before. So it was publicly seen, but we didn't want to see it. And then now we get into a very, very difficult defensive position. And we very, very much have to look to other developments in technology where China is becoming starter, and see where we still can match, or we need to see how we can adapt. So it's quite tough times ahead, but it's not impossible that we make it. Thanks.